everyone. Good evening. Welcome. First off, welcome to very exciting conversation. We've postponed, we rescheduled, we've hit bumps in the road, but I'm super grateful for the opportunity to talk with our guest here. So some of you may have seen the flyer and saw that Tasha Joyner was on the flyer, but she's unable to join us today. But we know that she has, that we're going to probably do this again as a follow-up at some point if they're open to it. So I'm not going to keep us here too long. I'll probably give us another minute or so for folks to come in. Welcome for those who are watching us on YouTube. This is also being recorded and will be shared on the Avery Research Center's YouTube channel. I didn't do my due diligence, which was to introduce myself. So I just started talking. But good evening. My name is Dr. Tamara Butler, and I serve as the Executive Director for the Avery Research Center for African American History and Culture at the College of Charleston. There's a lot of titles and things that go behind it, but that's the most important one that you should know about. And I'm very excited. I'm a product of Charleston County Schools. So it's good to talk to Charleston County educators and those who are working in the area to really think about our young people. So get your notes out, get your glass of water or wine, whatever you want to drink, since people got the cameras off, so we okay with that. And settle in. We're also going to open it up for questions towards the end of uh, the evening or towards the end of the event. So you're more than welcome to drop those in the chat. And we'll be fielding those questions as well. But it's really just a dialogue. All right. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce and then I'm going to turn it over to our conversation here and we'll go from there. All right. So I'm being joined today by Jameshia Means, formerly Jameshia Coleman, who is congratulations, an education enthusiast with 14 years of experience. She served as a certified middle level ELA teacher, certified school counselor, school based mental health clinician, and currently a licensed school psychologist too. She's worked outside of the school in support roles through nonprofit agencies such as People Against Rape and Communities in Schools. My best friend's mom worked really closely with communities in schools when we were in school. So I'm excited to see the organization still thriving. I believe she says she believes in serving students in an array of roles that has allowed her to have a holistic lens to see students and their needs through. Her passion lies in advocating for equitable practices for students of color, advocating for increasing awareness of diversity and how it benefits an ever changing society, and supporting the overall well being of educators of color. One thing I also wanted to toss in here is that we also met because they were really dynamic supporters of the Love Avery night at the basketball night. And so we met through the newly formed and well oiled machine called the Black Educators Affinity Group here in CCSD. So I'm excited to have this dialogue. Like I said, we welcome questions. And I'm going to turn it over for a little while to Jameshia to just share some of the work that she's doing and working on, and then we're just going to bounce it back and forth. So it's like a light tennis match.
Thank you so much, Dr. Butler. I appreciate that. So, yes, I am Jameshia Coleman. I am a current school psychologist for Charleston County School District. I'm also a licensed psychoeducational specialist for the state of South Carolina as well. And so, a lot of my passion just lies in that cross section of education and wellness and advocacy. And so, just creating a collaboration there for both parents as well as for educators. I've worked in so many different roles where I've been in the schools and I've been out of the schools. And if you have a child, then you know that in education we talk in code. Sometimes it seems like it's like, so do you want an IEP or a 504 because his MAP scores are like significantly low, and parents are like, yeah, girl, like whatever you say. And I just sometimes wish that there was like a bridge, a place where we were all able to come together. And that's why I thought that reading, parts of the book, with Dr. Butler's book, Where is the Justice? I think it's so good to take that holistic approach because that's just really what my passion really lies in. And I think that from working as a teacher, as a guidance counselor, but then when you're on the outside as a rape crisis advocate, with communities and schools, as a mental health therapist at DJJ, and at the alternative schools, you notice where all the gaps kind of lie, especially for black students and especially for black male students. And you see that it's not like these little holes that the kids just like whoops like kind of slide through. There are these big gaping gaps that are so easy. It's easier for kids, especially black kids, to fall through those gaps, than it is for them to get to a place like where you are, Dr. Butler, academically, or where I am professionally. It's a lot harder. So that's why as you go up, you don't see as many people around you who look like you. You start to wonder, well, where are the black people at? You start looking around and wondering where are the other black educators and where are the other black school psychologists. There's only 4 of us in Charleston County School District, and there's more than 40 school psychs for the district. So I just always am passionate about trying to figure out where are the gaps, what are we missing, and how can I be of service and help, because that's really just all I want to do is help people get to their dreams, especially helping black students get to their dreams. So that's kind of like where I just kind of want to be able to start at, Dr. Butler, and tell me what you think, about the big gaping holes and what you all researched and learned from your book, with what you've seen.
Sure. So I'm really excited because I think about, so this is so that we have a small point of reference. I'm going to toss this in the chat for people who so I can't so I co-authored a book with 3 other scholars from who are all in the field of education. One is Grace D. Player, who is assistant professor at University of Connecticut, who is also did all the beautiful artwork in the book. Then there is Emily Nemeth, who is at Denison University, associate professor, and then Dean Valerie Kinlock, who is the Renee and Richard Goldman Dean at the University of Pittsburgh for the School of Education. And so it was really dynamic in our sense of really thinking about over the course of, I would probably say at least 4 years, maybe more, maybe 4 or 5 years, around this concept of justice. So we were working with some students and teachers in a large urban district in the Midwest. And what we were curious about was really just this idea of engagement. So the as we're seeing now, which I think is really interesting, that the anti-critical race theory shenanigans is actually attacking one of the tenets that was really key to the work, and it's engaged learning. It's student centered, service learning, community centered learning. And so I think one of the biggest gaping holes that I see is that there's a disconnect between community and schools. And so as a result, I think teachers are equipped, educators writ large are equipped, and then even community-based educators. So you get your, whether it's your Sunday school teacher or the lady who lives down the street, um, who is like a babysitter. I think all of those individuals are educators, but we don't have the same tools. We don't have the same resources. We may not have the same access. And so the things that we do have, for example, someone who's based inside the school district understands, like you said, the code that people talk. They understand the some of most of the legislation. And then the people on the outside are like, I think I understand the legislation. I'm not quite sure what language y'all are speaking in the schools, but I want to help my students. I want to help these youth. And so it's trying, what I'm finding is that there's, for a lot of reasons, divides between the two, right? So how do we start to share across and kind of make that wall more permeable, which I think has been the struggle, because historically we've known that there's always been a very blurred line between most communities of color, between school and community. right? So the person who's teaching Sunday school might also be the teacher who shows up, in the English class, might also be a leader in another capacity in the community. So if there's not, it's not odd to see community members as educators, to see that overlap. And so for me, a gap is trying to reestablish that kind of relationship and trust that we can work together for our young folks, and that as a result, we can make a wider situation for engagement. Because if the legislation goes through, the kinds of things that these students were doing in this text, in this book, where they're looking at everything from animal rights to human rights to gentrification to environmental justice, um, that those kinds of ideas won't be able to be explored anymore, at least not in this capacity where they're actually talking to community members and the community members are informing their school choices and practices. So I just get nervous about some of the things that, I think schools are parts of community, but we often treat them as though they're not. And so if we can return to a place um, where we can really make room for parents and teachers, guardians, anyone who engages young people outside of those four walls can have the same language, can have a shared understanding of what's going to take to really help our teachers and also help our youth, our children, um, really, start to see what kind of opportunities are possible, right? So that it's not just about surviving in school, but it's about thriving and helping our community thrive. So that's like my 100 cents. Yeah.
That's is everything though. Like I wholeheartedly agree, and I feel like so often I have said at my tables of my schools, like we ended up building like fences or gates around schools allegedly for safety, but it began to keep the community out. It became more of a symbol of you are not really welcome here. And then we started to hire teachers from outside of, not just our community, but way outside of our state, not even in the Southeast. So we're missing like the culture pieces, especially, right? Like those pieces that really create the safety and the connection that we know that education is really rooted in for students. And because we know that nobody can learn anything new without like feeling a sense of safety. I'm big on neuroception, and I'm big on the idea of ensuring that people feel safe and people feel like that they can feel connected. And what I hear you saying, Dr. Butler, is without that sense of connection, that's really where the big gap is going to like come from, with the gap between the community not being able to access the school in the same manner. And now we've got like such a diverse society where we've got grandparents and aunts and extended families who are raising other students, and it just continues to create more of that gap without that sense of connection. And I completely agree that that's definitely an area that we're kind of missing, and like definitely an area that's causing more of that big divide for sure. Is it possible that I can share my screen, Dr.
Sure,
Butler?
sure. I think you have sharing couch. If you don't, let me know.
I don't. No, I
Okay, there you go.
don't.
You're ready. You're ready. You can go.
Okay. So I, speaking of that, I am working on this resource. It's not quite complete yet, but I am working on this resource. So it doesn't have a reference page quite yet, but I will get it and I will send it out. But I'm calling it Connected, and that's exactly what we've kind of been talking about. But it is saying a guide to helping parents advocate, celebrate, and educate their students. And I want to change that to a guide to helping parents and educators, because one thing that I'm noticing with the Black Educators Affinity Group, my work with Black Teacher Collective, that's more of the outward facing aspect of it, is that I'm running into people that have the same level of passion that I do, but they're like, well, I don't know what to say. I don't know where to start. Like, I'm not really sure like what happens. And again, that goes back to that safety, right? Like you're in this new situation and it's something like, It's something new, and people kind of are like, you're not really sure where to go, and so it's something that I've been working on, trying to, just trying to find ways to just help people. As always, that's all I ever feel like I ever say, is that I just genuinely want to help people. And I know right now it feels overwhelming. And so I tried to break this resource that I'm creating down into 3 parts. So step one of advocating is building relationships, for parents to build that relationship with their teacher, their child's teacher. And I was lucky that my kid did her early learning at Owens Christian Academy, and it is a requirement. If you are a parent of an OCA student, and Miss Owens does not play about parents interacting and coming to meetings and PTO meetings and everything. If you're not showing up at the school, you're paying a fee at Owens. So the parents are coming, but it's key, and it's something that, although my daughter is now in 2nd grade, at a different school, it's something that I feel that I had to learn. Although I was a well-seasoned educator by the time my child was already born, it was still something that when you become a parent, it's just different. You don't necessarily know. So just encouraging parents the importance of having that open relationship and dialogue with their child's teacher on a regular basis, but also not being afraid to ask questions about things that may be said that they don't understand. And that's something that, again, when there's that talk and people aren't really sure, like, I'm not really sure what you mean by IEP. Can you tell me what that means? Or, okay, so you said extra help. What does that mean? Because that's something I'm passionate about. It's a lot of things I'm passionate about, it seems like. But one of those things is part of my job as a school psychologist is administering those tests to determine, does a student qualify for special education services or not. And so that's something that sometimes I come to the table, I'm coming normally late, after the parent and the teacher have had a number of conferences. And sometimes I hear things like, well, yeah, they said that this can help my child get extra help. And I'm always clear with parents that, so this is to help your child. Like, I will be able to do an assessment. And yes, it is completely free for them to get this psychological evaluation. I can determine their strengths, their weaknesses, and their needs. But this information is twofold, because this information will also be used to determine if your child qualifies for special education. And special education is not extra help. Special education is identifying a kid with a disability. And I always want us to be clear about that, because I never want parents to feel like we're trying to like trick them into something or slide them into something. So I always encourage them, ask questions if we're saying something that doesn't seem right. And if talking to the teacher feels uncomfortable, knowing other adults in the building that they can trust, that they can talk to, from a janitor, someone in the janitorial staff, the lady at the front desk, the principal, the school counselor, the social worker. There's so many people who, have an impact on kids every day. And I just think it's so important for parents to know that. But then also having specific questions to ask is key. So knowing, what are my kids' strengths and what are their weaknesses, both personally and academically. Because so often we get caught up in like reading, writing, and math, and we forget that social and emotional and behavioral is important. Does my kid feel liked in this school? Do they have friends? Are there people that they get along well with? Do you notice that they seem tense or nervous at certain periods of time during the day? Those are really, really important questions. How can I help at home? Especially if they have a young child. I always feel like the gap between home and school when your kid is young is so small. So you have such a big opportunity to get in and be able to really help and really do that extra help. Really try to do some of that remediation before, special education is maybe necessary or needed because the gap is so small. But oftentimes, what we're teaching at school might not be translating to home because we might not be sending the resources, or you might just not know that they're there. Sometimes you just don't know what to ask. And then always asking their, if your kid is in school or going to daycare, who are three adults in the school that you can talk to if you're having a bad day? So being able to help your child identify their safe people, because it may or may not be their teacher, but they need to know that there are other people in this building that I can connect to. I can have touch points with different people in this building who make me feel safe. And then being able to ask children, like, how do you know that these people are safe people? Like, trying to help them kind of develop some of that conversation and some of that thought process around, what does safety look like for you? What does safety feel like for you? I think that's so important, also. So that's how I feel about advocating. And for parents and then for educators, I encourage them to join a local affinity group. We have one in Charleston County School District. I am pivoting more to do more outward and external advocating for affinity groups through Black Teacher Collective, which is something that I recently just kind of started and launched. But then also being able to tell educators just to speak up, because if you notice it and you feel it in your body, speak up. I will talk in a meeting and my voice will be shaking and I'm so nervous and on the edge sometimes, but it's so important because that emotion drives passion and people will attach to that, and there are other people who feel just as strongly as you do. And then I also encourage teachers to know their rights. Join a teacher organization. I encourage parents to know their rights as well, but I encourage teachers to make sure that you're part of some type of teacher protection organization like Palmetto State Teachers Association, or someone who can help protect you in the event that you need that, because I always think that that's important. So that's how I feel about advocating. Talk to me, Dr. Butler, about your thoughts on advocating and for parents
Yeah,
and educators.
I mean, I think your resource is spot on. So for me, I would say advocating is also about getting as much information, getting informed as at a many level as possible. So I would say if and when possible, learn specifically about legislation. Come to school board meetings would be great. And really also talking specifically to your teachers, whether they are your students' current teachers or past teachers. I think, for example, we do a lot of school supply drives, and we send kids, we send the students to school with all these materials, which is great, but we actually don't know what else teachers need or what else students would need for support. I love this idea of knowing who's in the building that you can talk to, that's so that it's not just so that people can understand that everybody's an educator. I wasn't gonna bring up the show, but I mean, I just think about Abbott, think about Abbott Elementary a lot these days. And there is a scene specifically where wanted to start like a gifted program, and they had a gifted student. One of the people that they found to be that was like vital to the school was actually one of the custodians. And so thinking about this idea that everyone engages young people at some level, whether it's the lunch people who know, they're gonna slide you. When I was younger, they would slide us an extra bowl of fries, right? Because it's like, if not, it's going to trash. All right, so just thinking about it's that is knowing who to talk to, um who knows that they can get that information to the right folks. And so once again, it goes back to trust. How do you develop trust as parents and educators with people in the building to say, if my child or students aren't talking directly to a principal or directly to someone who might be one of the teaching faculty, then knowing that there's somebody, that a point of contact somewhere in the school that they can trust. And I think that's really key, because I feel like we need that in a lot of spaces, right? Outside of schools, who else would you would want your young person, your youth, your child to talk to? And so why do those same kind of structures and systems fall away in schools, right? So we don't engage anybody else. I mean, I think on campus, I like talking to people who are the groundskeepers. Now, I don't know how many people stop and talk to them, but I think that they know a lot and can share a lot and can help us navigate the campus in ways that that we don't really, that we don't honor and we don't take advantage of, for lack of a better word. And so my hope is that we can really be advocates and really talk with and listen with, because I think that that's the part where we miss the mark, is we don't actually, like, when we go to parent teacher conferences, we're like, okay, thank you for these solutions, good day, but never like, what do you need? How can we support your classroom? What can, do you need us to volunteer? Is there something we need to set up? Should we, really show up for these parent advocacy groups and talk to our parent liaison? What can we do? So that's just something that I've been thinking about, is because I have a cousin who's in high school, and so I try my best to be, I always feel like I'm on both sides of the fence. I'm not parent, but I'm like, this is the way that you should probably be, these are things you should probably be asking guidance counselors and people you should be talking to. But also, on with my Avery hat, I'm like, teachers, if you need anything, educators, if you need something, then please let me know. How can we be a, kind of an intermediary between the two?
Yeah, I love that. I love what you said. How can I support your classroom? Like, such a good thought. Like, I definitely want to add that question in here into this resource. So, thank you. I love that question. Like, such a good question. Like, how can I support your classroom and beyond, like, the school supplies or when they run out, right? Because those of us who are educators know that we have an influx at the beginning, and then by December it's like, what happened to the Clorox wipes and the 80 boxes of tissue? Nobody knows when it's really time. So that, but also, and it's been so different now since COVID has happened. So it is difficult for parents to know how to support classrooms because so many schools haven't like reopened their doors to even allow parents to start coming back in yet. And so, some of those things, I used to work in preschool up until January of this year, and that was one thing that was really difficult for the preschool parents, was like, so I can't walk my kid to class, like I don't know what it, and that has been really hard. So knowing, if we are not able to come into the building, what other ways can I support like your classroom, like from a virtual perspective, is also such a great idea and a great question for parents to be able to ask. And I think that oftentimes teachers aren't used to people saying, how can I help you? And so I think that that could really be a good a good place to like be able to have a level conversation too sometimes. So I love that. The next, go ahead. I saw you unmute.
No, I was saying thank you. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So my second point in my resource is celebrate. So I have the A for advocate and then the C for celebrate. Because again, as parents, we are our kids' first teacher, and that is like repeated over and over and over in here, because I want parents to see themselves as educators. Just because so often I am at those tables and the parents are like, well, I don't know, you're the teacher, y'all are the experts, you tell me. And I'm always like, Mama, you are the expert on your child, though. Nobody knows your baby like you do, because nobody knows my baby like I do. I can hear the walls bumping, and I know that my daughter is in there doing handstands right now because I know her, right? Like, I am my kid's first teacher, and when this is over, I'm going to be helping her try to figure out how to hold her handstand. We're in a handstand phase right now. But in this resource, I talk about neuroception and understanding that neuroception is like just how we are wired. It's our alarm system, and it lets us know when we are safe or when we are not safe. And if you are a parent or if you are a mother, and if you have had a child birth, you know that they lay that little baby on your chest because they are wanting you to start regulating everything for them. You're regulating their body temperature, you're helping them regulate their breathing, but you're also helping them regulate their nervous system. And your nervous system is one of the first brain systems that's on, like it's on from the moment that you're born, and everything else starts to be built, but the brain is built from the bottom up. And so knowing what safety feels like, and being able to create that level of safety is so, so important for parents to know. Like, I know when my kid feels safe. You know, when you feel safe, when you feel relaxed, you know, when we able to put our shoulders down. Sometimes I tell my friends, like, girl, put your shoulders down. Like, because we can be so tense and we don't even notice it, but we can walk around with so much tension. And what we know it now from all of this like very current and relevant neuro research is that we know that trauma lives in the body and safety starts in the body. So you know that you are safe or you're not feeling safe based on what your body responses really are. And those are things that kids really have no control over when they're younger until they really start to learn it. And especially even us as adults, sometimes we don't know how to define anger for ourselves. Like if somebody says, "Tell me what anger feels like to you," like, would you know? Like, does your throat get tense? Do your ears get hot? Does your nose start to itch? Like, really being able to check in with yourself to know what anger feels like in your body is so important. And then being able to actually give it words, because that whole name it to tame it strategy that Dr. Siegel has been researching for years is so important. But in the light of being able to celebrate students and the neuroception, asking questions that educators or parents can ask themselves or ask their child, knowing what are your child's interests, what are things that they genuinely enjoy doing, like they would just do it just because, like, these are things that I know that my child is interested in, these are people who I know are my child's role models. What are your child's career aspirations, and are they kind of aligned to their interests? Do their career aspirations match the things that they're interested in? And then what words does your child use to describe themselves when you're saying, tell me what do you love about yourself? I do a lot of small groups, not as many as I would like, but I do a number of small groups as part of being a school psychologist. And one of the first few lessons that I do after we kind of set our norms and figure out what we're going to be doing in the group is I will always start off with like us talking about like what do you love about yourself, like how do you love yourself. And it's always so interesting because I always notice that so many students, when I say tell me things that you're really good at, like what makes you great, they take so long sometimes to figure out what they love about themselves, what they like about themselves. Or if I say, well, here's a feelings wheel, or here's some adjectives, here's an adjective list, like what words describe you. And listening, are they choosing positive words, are they choosing words that maybe bring up more uncomfortable or negative emotions, and then being able to have some thought and some conversation about that. And then when you start thinking about, well, how can I celebrate my child, or how can I celebrate myself? Affirmations, I believe in affirmations, affirming your child in the morning and at night, affirming your child on a regular, reminding them you've got a crown on your head. Did you hold it up all day today, or did it tip off? My daughter and I, we have a process, a routine every morning. We're saying our prayer on the way, to school every morning. And I say a piece and she says a piece. And at night, we're saying our prayers. But I'm always reminding her, Giselle, you are a leader and your peers will look to you for your leadership skills. What does a leader look like? If she's not having a good day at school, I'm asking her, did you demonstrate leadership abilities? What does that look like? Were you being a good listener? What are the steps to being a good listener? And then just giving them those positive affirmations on a regular basis, reminding them, because sometimes they don't hear it in their buildings. Sometimes they don't hear it in their classrooms, because schools are very much, especially now after COVID, we're like on the move right now. So we're trying to play catch up, and it's a lot happening, and it is so easy for students to feel overwhelmed. And I know you were talking about that at the beginning, and I feel like I would say 75% of the evaluations that I have open right now are because parents said, my kid is just overwhelmed and so anxious, and I'm not really sure like what to do, so something must be wrong with them. But it's just that we've kind of like tried to jump back in and tried to play catch up and everything. So just reminding your child by giving them some of those positive affirmations and reciting them with them. If you have a little kid, there's a great little podcast called Best Day Yet. They do the cutest affirmations. It's like a mom and her daughter. And I listen to it with my kid. They've got cute little songs. They've got guided meditations on there. They've got lots of great things on there, but they do lots of great affirmations with kids. Always having conversations if you've got older kids is so important. And then I always encourage parents to play with their kids or take their kids to the playground to play. You can learn, and I see my sorority sister look. I see my sorority sister Deronda looking at me because she knows we took our kids to the playground. I see, hey Braylon girl, I saw her waving at me. Hey girl, we went to the playground a few weeks ago because I'm such an advocate for playing, taking your kids to the playground or playing with your kids, because you can learn everything you need to know about a child at the playground, because that's how, like, that's their natural language, work or being a mom, or maybe you are, I don't know, a business owner, or athlete, or cake decorator, or whatever. But for kids, their chief job is to play. And so you can see how they do their best job when they play. You can see what they have learned about life, being a mom, being a student when they play, because they will play mommy and you will be like, is this what you think I am? Like, they will be in there like, I told you not. As my daughter does that. But it is a mirror for you to really be able to see what it is that they know. How do they solve problems when they're at the playground? If somebody's at the top of the slide and they want to go down, are they pushing the kid down the slide? Are they able to use their words to say, please move? Are they patient? Do they get angry and frustrated? Do they decide, I could go find something else to do? Are they a solution seeker? One thing that when I was in preschool and I would go to the playground, that's where I would always start my evaluations at in preschool, is at the playground. Because one thing that came up a lot was the lack of communication for kids. And I want to see when they're at the playground, are they communicating? When they're sitting with their peers at their little lunch tables, that's when they are having their own kind of conversation. Are they communicating then? Can they ask for help from their teacher? Can they go to a friend? And are they even trying? Because communication is not just verbally. A lot of times it's non-verbally. Sometimes a kid would walk up to me with the ball and hand me the ball, and the teacher would be like, oh, well, I didn't know. Like, they normally don't. And it's like, sometimes kids just are looking for something different, and sometimes they're just looking for somebody to, like, be there. Like, that is a form of communication. I'm handing you the ball. I'm saying, come play with me, What is your child communicating, and how do they communicate when they are at the playground? So being able to play with your kids is so, so important. And then regulating your emotions first, so that you can build on that safety between you and your child. That goes back to that neuroception, because when I feel calm and safe, 9 times out of 10, my child is also feeling calm and safe. And we know that when you have a screaming baby, if you start screaming, it's only going to make the kid get more upset. But when you get calm and you start soothing them, they have a tendency to kind of calm down as well. So ensuring that you are checking in. Like, for me, sometimes I need a little bit of space between work and when I pick up my child, just because I work a stressful job. Sometimes I need that little bit of a gap to just be by myself, take a couple of deep breaths, take some moments to calm down, and then go pick her up. Because sometimes when I have that moment back to back to back to back, like you and I were talking about before we started the Zoom, Dr. Butler, you just kind of like, I don't know, like my whole day, everything is all over the place. But then knowing, like, what do I do when I feel overwhelmed? How do I react when I'm annoyed? How does it feel when I'm frustrated? Knowing those things about yourself will really help you to know how your child handles those kinds of same those same types of frustration in a kid world. So you may not be, yelling or screaming, but your toddler may be flipping over tables at school, but you're like, well, no, I mean, I don't flip over tables at home. Well, no, but are you able to talk about your emotions? Are you able to say, mommy's feeling a little bit angry right now, so I need to go take some time to calm down. I'm going to go sit in my room for a little while to calm down. I'll be out when I'm feeling better. Being able to give it language and to normalize that sometimes it's okay to not be okay, but when I'm angry, I'm not going to flip over things, because sometimes it's the lack of kids seeing us deal with difficult emotions that makes them not know. Because if they never see you experience anger, then when they feel it in their little bodies, it's like, what do you do besides take something and just throw it? You're like, I don't know what else to do, because you go back to that base level of functioning. So giving it language and giving it words can be helpful. Tell me your
Yeah.
thoughts.
No, when you said that and when you were talking, I was thinking about a few things. I think one is play doesn't stop with K-12. So, one of the things that I think the engaged learning, service learning part comes up is that it was really for one of those teachers, it came up, Miss Washington, that she created a community garden because a church approached her and she was working with high school students. And she was like, I just want to take my students outside to play. So from there, they were able to just the idea of so often, especially in this world where we're so connected to everything's digital, a phone, a TV, or whatever, that sometimes it's like, how do you play? Right? So when we talk about asking looking at our children and their play, sometimes it's like, well, when was the last time you actually got out there and decided to double dutch or throw a ball, right? Or play Uno or do something other than like my family, it's word games on an iPad is what my family does consistently. And so I'm like, when do we go back? When we gonna go back to playing Scrabble? Like we used to play Scrabble on the weekend. So it's those things. It's also something really key in terms of I thought about this earlier today because when you said what does it feel like when you're overwhelmed, what do you do? And I remember once the pastor of the church I went to said the most spiritual thing in the world is a nap and a snack. And I think it's the thing that we used to do when you were like when you were in preschool and kindergarten, but we forgot to do that. Like sometimes most grown people everybody just needs a nap and a snack, and the world is a better place. And so it's about a reset. If you need a minute to calm down, what do you do? Or you need a minute to reset. My thing is, I love a good Spotify has really changed my life because they got all kinds of sounds out there. So sometimes I just like turn on the. I can't turn on the ocean sounds because that's what I fall asleep to. So if I do that in the car, I'm going to end up taking a nap in my car. But just thinking about these things that are readily available sometimes to us to just be like, I need a deep breath, right? Whether it's calm. I know the radio station did something recently where Forte Jazz Lounge sponsors these kind of like minutes. There's like 3 minutes of just jazz in the middle of the day and for you to breathe and just reset. And so I agree. It's and also giving it language. We don't realize, especially now that whether or not your child is in school or they're doing it virtually, eventually we're about to transition to them being in the house all the time. And so it's like, how do you create language? How can you give it language when it's like, I am really not in the mood to talk? And I think especially among the Black community, and I think some other communities of color, Southern communities, if you say that back to a grown person, they're gonna look at you sideways. But it's like I'm actually trying to communicate to you, like I'm literally not in the mood to talk. And I gotta respect that because if not, then we're gonna get a lot of attitude and things going on. So I think it's really important, and I really appreciate this concept of giving our emotions language and helping all generations understand that, especially as I'm seeing now with generations, for example, where grandparents are raising grandchildren. Um, and so how do you try to fill in that it's okay for younger generations to talk and express themselves in healthy ways that I don't think was always allowed or available. And so that's another place where we talk about how can communities be well. We have to start using language.
Yes.
So
Yes. Like that's I love all of that because I just, yes, because again, because of the strategy of name it to tame it, because of the research of like Dr. Dan Siegel and everything we know about like the whole vagus nerve and everything, that we have to give it language. And it's something that honestly I didn't even know that I needed until like probably 3 years ago, that I started working on this with my therapist, who happens to be a black woman, but she was like, girl, you need some like feelings vocabulary. You need some feeling words. Cause I would be like, I mean, it made me feel like, she would be like, it's not a feeling word because you said and like I did not realize that I did not have like a significant feeling or emotion vocabulary. And it has taken me a while to realize one of the things that I like the most is quiet time. Like, I don't really know how you classify that, but when people be like, what are your hobbies? What do you like to do? I like to have quiet time. Like, honestly, like, I like when things are quiet. I don't know. Me and my mama spent a lot of time at the library when I was younger, so maybe that's it. I became an English major. You read books by yourself. I enjoy quiet time, but I have realized that because I like that, when I don't get a significant like amount of that, I can feel edgy. I can feel overwhelmed. I can feel frustrated. And I know because my patience is so short, because I literally feel like I'm about to lose it. Like it's a little man in my throat trying to break out and yell sometimes, because it's like I've been on all day long, and I just sometimes like that quiet time. So having that feelings vocabulary, and even just knowing like tapping into your body to know what anger feels like in your body, you'll be able to, then you'll start to recognize it before it actually becomes anger. Because it's like, she just said something that made my little heart jump. Like, I think those flutters might be the anger coming, or like realizing that your ears get hot, or feeling the heat around your face. I know for me, I know I'm getting angry because I all of a sudden I can't hear anything. It's like, but I mean, how long has that been happening to me before I was in my 30s and I realized like that? Because so many times we like 0 to 100, but a lot of times we don't realize like it goes back to the body. And if I can recognize it in my body, I can calm down. I can realize like I'm feeling angry, and your brain will automatically be like, oh, okay, I know what to do with anger. I know where to file that. We have skills and strategies for that. But it's the lack of being able to actually express your feelings and give vocabulary to how you're feeling that can oftentimes just cause people to just get so much more overwhelmed. And so my last letter that I had advocate, I had celebrate, and then my E is for educate. Because again, we are our child's first teacher. And so I talked in this resource about growth mindset and, the importance of that. But I did, put a little moment in there about growth mindset, because it gets a little tricky when we talk about growth mindset, especially in marginalized populations, because the idea of growth mindset can have some of that, like pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of thing. And sometimes that can be hard for kids or adults from marginalized communities, because sometimes there is this assumption that there is this baseline level of confidence that I noted in here from this U.S. News article that I posted yesterday. It was amazing. But ensuring that like that baseline level of confidence goes back to us as parents. That's where we are giving, that's back to that C of celebrating. I've been giving my child positive affirmations, and I'm building them up, and I'm giving them significant resources, and we're tapping in to know who their safe people are in the building. So knowing whether or not your child has that baseline is so important before we start to encourage the growth mindset. Because just relying on the growth mindset and just trying to talk about it without ensuring that there is that baseline just won't, it's not, it doesn't work. It's not an equitable stance. So you always want to make sure that the student has that baseline level, but then with some growth mindset, like specific steps asking, what strategies do you teach your child to help them overcome challenges? That is something that I feel like I see so often is kids struggle with knowing how to solve problems. What do I do when me and my best friend have had a fight? Oh my gosh, I'm 13 and my boyfriend broke up with me and my life is over. Like knowing what to do to overcome challenges, knowing how can I navigate around something that feels difficult, and starting to teach that from when kids are younger. Again, that's something you can do at the playground. You can see your child tussling with another child, or they've got siblings at home and they're arguing over a toy. What strategies can they use to problem solve? I always say as a mom that I feel like one of my biggest jobs is to teach my child how to accept the word no for an answer and how to make good decisions, because I feel like that's all being an adult is, a series of making decisions. What time you gonna wake up, what you gonna eat for breakfast, what you gonna wear to work, what time you gonna leave the house, what you gonna do first when you get to work. Like all you do as an adult is make decisions all day long. So teaching kids how to make good decisions is a critical step, because if you don't know how to make good decisions, you just end up, I'll try this and I'll try that, and maybe you don't end up really knowing what to do. And how do you know when you need help? Like, how do I know this is as far as I can go on my own? It's time for me to reach out for help. What strategies do you promote to teach or promote problem solving? What strategies do you promote, or what strategies do you teach to teach your child how to advocate for themselves? Because again, as a parent, you're not always there in the school building. So if your child needs help in class, how do they ask for help? Do they raise their hand? How does that make them feel to raise their hand and ask for help? So often with students who truly do have disabilities, when I'm at the table for reevaluation meetings and we're going over things in their IEP, accommodations, or things in their 504 plan, a lot of times there are things in there and the kid is like, I don't want to leave the classroom. Like but it's been on their like IEP or their 504 for like the last 6 years. And then I'm looking at their test grades and their test grades are really low. And so I'm meeting with the kid before the re-eval and I'm saying, tell me about your grades in science, because like all of your test grades are low. And they're like, oh, tests are hard. I'm like, do you leave the classroom? Because on your accommodations, one of them is that you leave the classroom to take the test, that we put you in a different location. Yeah, my teacher always asks, but I don't want to leave the classroom. Like, it makes me feel different. It makes me feel nervous. Like, everybody's looking at me. Well, when they're younger and they're in elementary school, they liked it because it made them feel special. But by the time I get them in middle school, they're like, absolutely not. They don't like all of those things that they loved in elementary suddenly become the things that isolate them. They no longer want to be pointed out for being different. They want to blend in middle school. So it's a completely different phase. But sometimes we still as educators have things like that on their plan that don't serve them, or we're still trying to encourage them to do certain things that are not helpful for them. And sometimes they'll go along with it, and sometimes they'll do things maybe to self-sabotage or something. So how do you advocate for yourself? And again, are you able to name emotions that you're feeling and where they're located in your body? And then some action steps for parents is to always be specific in your praise. So instead of telling your child, oh, you're so smart. You look at that. You got that 100 on that test because you're smart, just like your mama. I'm guilty. I say stuff like that too. You still want to also remind them, like, look at you. Like, you were able to sound out this word. You were able to solve all of these math problems. I appreciate the way that you're looking at me when I talk to you. I love how you're using those good listening skills. Being specific, excuse me, in your praise of your child can be so important, so that they begin to understand that there are specific task, and there are specific things to be able to look forward to. So I'm not just relying on having some type of natural talent, or I'm a smart student, because then that allows students to say, well, I'm not smart, she's smart, I'm not smart. That, like, there is no such thing. Like, ensuring them that we can all work hard, like everybody's working hard, helping them practice problem solving scenarios, reading stories with them about characters who persist and learn through failure and challenges. And then also, in that same U.S. News report, they talked about a research study that was done with some ninth graders, where they asked the students to journal about a time when they had a failure and it changed them for the better. And there was like a great increase. It was something like maybe a 60 or 65% increase in student effort, and it persisted for a number of weeks, just because reminding people that facing difficulty is not new. Like, you have been through hard things before. As a parent, sharing times when you have been through something hard is so important as well. So being able to teach them, I have been through difficult times, I have failed at something, and I still made it, is so important. And then I ended my resource with this quote from your book. Because I thought that this is like really kind of where I got stuck at. It says, what if we rebuild schools into places, to use Rhonda Johnson's words, that focus on, oh, I got a typo there, I need to fix that, that focus on what's best for students and teachers? What if these are places that reject deficit perspectives and instead value, honor, and see students, teachers, families, and communities wholly and holistically? I loved all of that. I would have put all of the rest of it in there if I could, but I think it's beautiful. I think it's perfect, and it's definitely what I'm aiming for. And so I'm so appreciative to you, Dr. Butler, and your colleagues, and everybody at Avery, and all of your fellow authors on the book as well.
Thank you. I mean, I was like, who knew what would grow out of it? But I'm also just grateful for this resource that you've created, because I think it does the thing that we're always hopeful for. So one of the things I say is that we were strategic in choosing a press that works, that's is Teachers College Press, right? So really making sure that it reaches the hands of educators, and then kind of how do you see it taking up its own space in the world. And so I love the resource as a whole. And then I just like that, that we got a little shout out at the end in thinking, so Rhonda Johnson was the president of the teachers union. So it was Columbus, in Columbus. So she was the president of the teachers union. And so really talking to her was important, because some of the teachers that we were working with were part of the union. And so to see them really trying to think about organizing and strategies and schooling that's not just about job security, because I think people get a lot of mixed messages about what a union is, but how these folks are coming together and thinking about the wellness of students and the wellness of communities. And so I'm grateful that that quote stood out to you, because that really is the driving force of the text, is that we ask a lot of questions, but one of them is, what is justice, is usually the question that we get asked a lot, and how do we define it? And I've given a lot of different iterations, but at the end of it, it's really about coming up with an answer that's strategic, that looks more towards strategy. So for me, justice isn't necessarily eye for an eye, because I don't think that works, especially when we're looking at schools. I think something goes sideways if we look at it that way, but instead it's really asking for like restorative, something that's transformative. A colleague, one of the co-authors, said something recently that it's also a practice. It's an enactment of what it means to be someone who's focused on that there is a different world beyond this one, and what does that look like? And so, schooling every generation, we've gone the gamut. And so I think this is the best time to really think about how you are asking us to get involved and that schools are not a place where it's not like the hospital, right? Like you send them in there, you hope that the doctors do what they do, and then the people come out. Um, School doesn't function that way, right? It's a collective it's a collective act and a collective action. And so, if we send our young people in with the kind of social skills and emotional awareness and skills that they need, that they've cultivated at home, then those continue to grow in schools. And then they continue to grow when they leave schools. And so it's the same concept that all of this is one big, I don't like a social experiment, but it's something else. It's something that really gets us to think. Um, School becomes almost, I say this, it becomes like a test ground for the social skills. So when I think about the students in the book, there was a group I was working with who were several students who were looking at human sex trafficking. That's the topic they chose. That's the social justice issue they wanted to tackle head on. And none of them identified as artists. Like, so when we did an interview, they were like, I played a viola, I played a violin, I do volleyball, I think I'm a graphic designer. But when they were given the chance to articulate how we can address human sex trafficking, they actually created a huge art piece. And I was like, but none of you ever said y'all were artists. Nope, not a single person. And they created this huge 6 by 8 foot installation. And so it became a place of play, and it became a place where it's like, well, because we have a site where we have people who trust us, we've learned to express ourselves emotionally, we feel safe, that this is something that we can tackle. And so I think that that's also key, is what could happen if we send our young people in with the kind of skills, and schools are places that are seen as safe and trustworthy, the kinds of things that will come out, the kind of work and thoughts and questions and reflections that could emerge in that space is limitless. But we can't do that if we haven't collectively thought about wholeness, and thought that we are all working together for our young people. So, yeah. Well, we have two questions, and so first I want to, I don't know how many of y'all know how to use the Zooms. We've been on the Zooms, but we want to give a round of applause for Miss Jameshia, because that was a dynamic resource that she didn't have to make. But I'm really looking forward to future iterations, and maybe we'll share it on Avery, or maybe she'll have people pay for it. I don't know what your final final use is, but I would love to be able to share it. So I don't know if y'all know how to do these round of applause, but do those. And we had two questions in the chat that wanted to jump in, ask out, and then if there are any more questions, please drop them in. So this one was a little bit earlier in the conversation. It was really about advocating. And so how do you navigate seemingly taking sides while advocating for or supporting students, families, teachers, and administration? So that was one. How do you navigate that? And then the other one is, how can we support teachers without overstepping? What are needs that best support teachers along with students?
Yeah, both good questions. So, with the first one about navigating taking a side, I mean, you got to take a. I don't say that you take a side, but I always tell people I take a side, and my side is always that of what is in the best interest of the child. So I'm always team kid. Like, that's always going to be me. I'm not taking the parent side or the teacher side. I'm always taking like team kid side, because sometimes what is in the best interest of the child may be different than what the teachers feel, or it may be different than what the parents feel. So I think that you don't necessarily have to take a side, as long as you keep the focus on what's in the best interest of the kid. And I will say that anytime I've ever been in a tense meeting, where it seems like we're not really in agreement between home and school, because as a school psychologist, you do sit in that middle seat a lot of times, I try to always bring the conversation back to what do we feel is in the best interest of this child, though? What are we really asking? And then what do we really believe that this student truly needs? And if you're still confused there, always take it to the source and take it to the kid, because I think that kids are experts. I love talking to kids. I would spend all day with them if I could, and people who know me know that I love kids. So if you feel like between home and school or trying to navigate that it's difficult, taking it back to the kid and asking the kid, like, so here's kind of where we are, tell me what your thoughts are, and then asking the kid, what do you feel comfortable with me sharing as a result of this conversation, because I want to make sure that your voice is heard, because that's a lesson in teaching kids how to advocate for themselves. And I will invite a 7-year-old to a meeting if necessary, just like I will invite a 17-year-old to a meeting. So I say take a side, but take the side of the kid and what's in the best interest of the child. And then the second question about how do we support educators without overstepping our boundaries? What are needs that best support teachers along with students? I think that's a great question. And again, I think that goes back to asking the teacher, what is it that you need from me? How can I support you? And I know that was something, Dr. Butler, that you said early on in the beginning, that I think is such a great question to ask. And I think that educators probably don't feel like you're overstepping the boundaries, again, when you work to build that relationship. And so not being afraid of your emotions, even if they're kind of rough that day, but always maintaining a level of being respectful, will always be able to take you as far as necessary. So I think that, being able to support educators without overstepping your boundaries is always asking people what they need. What is it that you need from me? And I think that that's just a key question for helping anybody with anything, because people won't be able to receive help or receive support from you until they feel like they're ready. So asking people, what is it that you need from me, and being able to know what your role is and being able to help them. And it might be different if you're a parent, because that might cause you might have to have a conversation with somebody different. If it's impacting your child or something like that, you might have to have a conversation with the principal or the assistant principal or something like that. But if you're someone who's seeking to support the teacher from the outside, just asking them, what is it that I can do to help you, is always helpful.
Thank you. And then we have one question that traveled in from YouTube. So it says, I'm a stay-at-home mom with my child, and my child thrived with virtual learning with my assistants, and is now behind post the return to school to the classroom. The parent wants to homeschool full time, but is nervous about how it will affect the student's social life. What are ways that they can incorporate activities that keep the student involved and create great relationships, but also thrive academically at home?
Such a good question. I love that. So I would say making sure that you have your child involved. There's a lot of free things that happen. I know that like the public library has like days that they'll have I don't know, I can't remember specifically what they call it, but it's like homeschool day or something like that, where they have, they'll have someone reading to the kids, or they may have arts and crafts, or they may have like science projects or things going on. So tapping into some of those like free places, playgrounds again are always good ways to be able to help your child with being able to build upon their social skills as well. And so that's the key, is that making sure it's the difference between homeschool and a traditional school is like, in a traditional school, they don't have any control over the kids that they mix and mingle with. Versus when it's homeschooled, even when you're working to do some things, it can be a little more curated. So making sure that you're giving your child opportunities and yourself to interact with different groups of people in settings that you might not be aware of. They might not know what to expect, because that's how you can really help to teach a lot of those social skills. What do you do when you feel overwhelmed? Taking them to festivals. We live in a great city here in Charleston, and it's springtime and summertime, and Charleston likes to be outside. So taking them to a lot of those different places where they have the opportunities to still interact with kids, especially kids of their own age, and always remembering that kids learn best from kids. So if you feel like they're not getting it from you, then taking them someplace, especially when it comes to the social skill development piece, kids learn best from other kids. So, giving them as many opportunities as you can to allow them to be able to interact with kids that are in their same developmental age, which I think is important to know that it's not the same as your chronological age. You might be 13 but you might developmentally be 16 but you might developmentally be 10. We all have different things that make us different. We're all neurodiverse types of people, so making sure that you know what your child needs developmentally and seeking to put them into those places is helpful.
I like that. I mean, I think I don't have any additional questions, but I think those are the questions from our audience. And if I say nothing else, I want to say thank you for sharing this as and hopefully we can do this again at some point. My encouragement to all who are viewing, whether you're viewing it in live time or you're viewing it later, is to add questions to the YouTube link. Come and find the post on Instagram, Avery Research Center. You can also find the Black Teacher Collective as well, and posting those questions because it could give us some fodder for our future conversations about, what else did we miss or what else did we not address. And so I just want to say thank you so much for, after a long day at work, of coming in and sharing resources and sharing and kind of just a little bit of conversational tennis this evening. So I just want to say thank you for that.
Yes, thank you for the invitation. I loved it. Thank you so much.
No problem. Well, if you all need to, I also want to say a big shout out to Courtney Hicks, who is our outreach and public program coordinator, who keeps us on our toes around here at Avery and keeps us on the social medias. So, want to thank you for being behind the scenes. If you need anything from the Avery Research Center, I want to know what we're up to. We're on all social media platforms, even TikTok. No, you will not find me on there doing any of the TikTok dances because I am not going to do that to myself. But I do encourage you to engage any of our material, a lot of our lovely videos done by students and staff. And hopefully you'll join us again. We're getting ready to kick off our big educator week um, as well. And Dr. Butler will not be doing the I Like challenge on TikTok. That's not going to happen. Dr. Butler will be doing that I'm going to sleep challenge, and thank y'all for that. But I want to say thank you, everyone. Please share the video with colleagues. And one day we hopefully will be doing this conversation in person, so it can be some hands-on dialogue. Any closing remarks, Ms. Coleman?
No, thank y'all so much for joining. Please, you can follow the Black Teacher Collective. Remember, you do not have to be an official educator. We are all educators, and you can also follow me on Instagram. I'm at miss.ms.jameshia, Jameshia. And I hope to be doing more of this and more talking. And shout out to those oh so lovely ladies of the great Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. They showed up for me, and I'm so appreciative for all of my sorority sisters. And my mama was on here too, as well as my former co-workers, Miss Reed and Miss Bland. So I'm so appreciative. Thanks, y'all.
We love you.
Thank you. I love y'all.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening.